About
Ito po din.
I want to ask director and how did the movie come about? How was the process?
Yes. So the question is, how did the movie come about and what was the process? First, I just want to say I spoke to Alessandra not too long ago. She feels deeply apologetic that she couldn't be here. She really cares about this film and respects all of your time, and so she's very, very sorry that she couldn't come. She's following them. As far as how the movie came to be, I'm a filmmaker in the U.S. and I came across a photograph of a woman holding her husband who had just been killed. And I could not shake this image from my head. Woke up thinking about it, went to bed thinking about it, and just felt compelled to understand further what had led to that. And so I found the journalist who had arranged the story, and I called her here in Manila. That's Rika, who ended up becoming our researcher. And she, on the phone from Los Angeles to Manila, told me story after story of different stories that she was covering and people that she was covering here. And I couldn't believe it and understand. And so she invited me to come to Manila and spend a couple weeks with her and the journalist friends and sort of do some ride-alongs. And there was a lot of really emotional scenes that we went to. Scenes where people, had lost a loved one due to the drug wars and this and that. And for me, I'm American. I had never been here before. I even asked myself, why do I feel the need to come and tell this story? But sometimes you are called in life to do something, and I felt that there was a higher presence that was compelling me to come do this. And so when I came, I was really amazed at just how welcomed I was by Pinoy people, Filipino people, some of the nicest, warmest people I've ever met in the world, and just very optimistic and welcoming. And so through hearing people's stories, I realized more and more that this was something that I had to do. And so I did a lot of research. I really made sure, knowing as an outsider coming here to do a film, a local story in Tagalog language, that I would really have to know my research and make sure that it felt authentic. And so to me, it was really listening to people and making sure that their stories were authentic.
Did you find it challenging to do a project wherein you're not very familiar with the
With the Middle East? Community, both in the film side and also just in the public and the stories that we were talking to. The beautiful thing about cinema is that it's a universal language, and it's a window into the human condition. And so whether the film is in Tagalog or English or Hindi, there's a certain truth in the human experience. And that's the great thing about cinema, is that it can break down divides and allow you to walk in someone else's shoes. And so some of the challenges of language were not as difficult as one would imagine. Of course, Alessandra, Art, and Jake all, very fluent in English, so it was easy to communicate between takes. And then in the middle of the take, I would just watch their eyes and see if they believed it. And if they did, then we knew we were getting what we wanted.
How is it working with the Filipino cast?
It was actually very, very beautiful and supportive. The cast and crew were willing to be so giving and supportive with their time. And I felt a lot of support in the process. And I think, sometimes when you're setting out to tell a story, the universe conspires for it to happen. And there's a certain lightning in the bottle that you catch. And in this case, everyone that was there believed in the story that we were telling and gave it 150%. And so, I've worked with a lot of actresses in the West, even like Academy Award winners. And the level of talent that Alessandra brought to this is incredible. It's very unique. I think she's a national treasure in a lot of ways. And I think she can win an Oscar one day. She's truly one of the greats, not just here, but in the world. And so I felt very fortunate to work with people like Alessandra and others who were not only incredibly talented, but very kind people, very collaborative.
No more questions?
One more.
Okay.
How how did you assemble the cast?
So the question is about assembling the cast. Early on, I partnered with the producers at Reality Entertainment, and direct Eric Mati, who I think is one of the greatest visionaries from the Philippines, has a great, reputation amongst cast and relationships. And so they were the ones who suggested to me Alessandra. And I saw a film of hers, Woman of the Ruins, and I was just totally blown away. And in that film also was Art Acuna, who Jake Macapagal, for example, was in Metro Manila, which was a huge international hit and won the award at Sundance. And so when I was in Hollywood, that film got circulated pretty widely among Hollywood executives, and so I'd seen it. And so Art Acuna was like, you should talk to Jake, and I met him and realized he would be perfect. And then Miko I'd seen in this film Bambanti with Alessandra, and he was much smaller at the time. And when he came in to read for the part, I just almost had tears in my eyes. And so I don't know if everyone's seen the film yet, but Miko steals the show in a lot of ways, and it's a remarkable performance.
Thank you, Mr. Lars Santiago. Any more questions? Ano po? Miko, ano daw ang reaction mo sa sinabi tungkol sa'yo ni Direk?
Actually po ngayon ko lang po nalaman na napanood niyo po pala yung movie. Kasi po, isa rin po yun sa pelikula pong mga, isa po yung memorable sa akin na mga nagawa ko pong pelikula. Yung naging nanay ko rin po si Tita Alessandra de Rossi, na marami rin po natuwa sa amin. At natuwa rin po ako kasi po, napanood po ni Direk yung ginawa po na pelikula dati. Kaya po, na-miss ko rin po si Tita Alessandra po noon na maging nanay ko po ulit. Kaya po, nung nalaman ko po yung audition po dito sa pelikula na po, na ginanahan po ako ng sobra, lalo na po nung nalaman ko pong si Tita Alessandra po yung magiging nanay ko. Sobrang natuwa po ako kasi sa wakas po makakasama ko po ulit siya. Kasi po, sobrang saya po kasi kasama ni Tita Alessandra. Komportable po ako bilang nanay po. Komportable po ako bilang nanay ko po siya sa lahat po ng mga naging pelikula namin. Kaya maraming salamat po at kinuha niyo po ako bilang casting audition.
He said, thank you very much for casting him in your film, Direk.
Thank you. Thank you
Okay.
for giving it your all.
Yes. Yes, from Miss Kate Adahar.
Hi, sir. Sir, is it your first time filming outside the US? And what was the experience like shooting here in the Philippines? Did you have to make major adjustments? And how long did it take to finish the whole film?
So the question was about shooting here outside the U.S. I have directed a film in India previous to this, and that was the film called The Ashram with Kalpen. And so I actually am quite excited to shoot films outside of the U.S. There's incredible stories and incredible talent, and also filmmaking communities all over the world, and Manila was no exception. I feel very fortunate to have top level both artists and technicians to make, because there was a lot of talk about should we shoot on a film set. This is takes place in some very violent neighborhoods, and so shooting in the real location was a challenge in that you have less control of the circumstances. Weather was an issue. We got hit with some typhoons. It was not an easy shoot. It was a very intense labor of love. But I think that authenticity is something you can't reproduce, and that truth was always the guiding principle of this. And so for us, to make sure that we had, if we're telling a story truthfully about the people that are living, through this circumstances, it's very important that their faces and their communities are represented truthfully. And for me, again, I felt a huge responsibility as a foreigner coming to tell this story, that if we didn't tell it truthfully, that it would actually be disrespectful for the people that it was about and for audiences here. So we did a tremendous amount of research and homework to make sure that it's represented. And you know, people say filmmaking is telling a story. I actually think filmmaking is deeply listening to stories around you and that reproducing that authentically. And so for me, it was really just every detail to make sure it was truthful. And so my hope is that the film will have an authenticity and resonate with audiences here, but it will also be completely different than anyone's seen before because it's coming sort of filtered through a universal lens. And so, you know, like I was saying earlier, cinema has the power to transcend across divides. Like people in France and in Los Angeles and in New York and have seen this film and connected to it on a human level. And my hope is here also that it can connect across different groups of people to see the humanity in all of us.
How long did it take to finish the whole film?
We shot the film over 16 days, and then it was a long post-production. It ended up being about a year of post-production. And, you know, that's just also how things, you know, in Hollywood, they spend a lot more time, so it was, you know, just a little bit longer in that regard. So I guess about a year and a half total.
And would you be interested in doing other films in the future?
I would certainly be open to it. I think it's really about the story itself. Is there something that I connect to that because it's a long process to make a film. So if there was other stories, we've even is a conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Who else?
Hi Ben, I'm John. I'm a blogger. First and foremost, this particular topic is a very sensitive one. Foremost in the Philippines because, of course, even though it's fiction, it's kind of a reality for us. Were you mostly shocked about what was happening? Generally.
There are the realities that you're talking about and that I was exposed to and saw.
Yeah.
There were definitely heartbreaking stories that we discovered and then we heard and then we put into the film. They're not the only realities. I think, you know, when I came to the Philippines, I was, you know, this was just one small sliver of what was happening here, and you know, just going out and seeing the nightlife and the, you know, just people going to work, and I mean, it's like anywhere. This is just one aspect of what was happening, and so it was definitely heartbreaking to hear. And so for us, we really decided to focus on the human cost and the human story, and it's really about family and what you would do for the people you love, what the lengths you would go to, and sometimes in these stressful situations, we can actually hurt the people we love without realizing it, and it comes from a place of love. And so the film really studies that, and also I think the film is also about the stigma that we place on certain people, that the sins of your past should not determine the actions of your present, and that, you know, putting certain people, and this is anywhere in the world, in my country back home, it's incredibly divided right now, and there's groups of people that are dehumanizing each other. And so this is, I think, a human issue that we're all faced with now, which is how do we not place judgment on those who you know, might have done things in their past, and how do we see the humanity in all of us? And so my hope is that a film like this can help recognize that humanity.
Was it difficult to actually make it a little bit political? Because of course it's like a campaign of the government to have that drug war in the first place. Was it difficult to like have that separate and just plainly make it a story of a mother per se?
We, you know, the campaign of the drug war has 2 points of view to it, one that's for and one that's against. And so in the film, we try to explore both perceptions. It's not, you know, saying it's good or it's bad. It's not one-sided. But it did, I feel a certain sense of responsibility not to color it with my own perspective, to try and stay in the story. Our hope is that the politics take a backseat, and that you can go in and watch this film regardless of how you feel about politics, and just be taken for an intensely emotional roller coaster.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, John. Who else? Mr.
MJ.
Junardo.
Yeah, kay Miko na lang. So, Miko, kung sa experience mo working with a foreign director, magsig pa siya.
Ano po, sa lahat po ng mga nagawa kong pelikula, isa po si Direk sa pinakamagaling po para sa akin. Kasi siya po yung tipong director na magasasalain niya po lahat. Yung mga shots, yung kung ano po yung mismong angulo ng camera, tapos kung paano po yung mga unit po namin ng mga artista, kung paano po yung gusto niyang pag-atake, kailangan niya pong makuha yun. Kasi mas maganda po yung maging resulta po ng magiging shot po natin. Kumbaga, tsaka ano rin po si Direk, hindi po siya kagaya po ng ibang
Local director.
Opo, na
Yung bang director na kumawag sa iyo?
Opo.
Sisigawan ka ba?
Opo, parang ganun po. Hindi po, hindi po siya ganun.
Ayan, okay na. Sige, continue. Please continue your storytelling about director.
Say something nice, Miko.
Yeah. It's not saying something nice.
Please tell me afterwards.
Yes, okay. Nico, your experience working with director.
Si Direk po, hindi po siya kagaya po ng yun nga po.
Mga ibang local director sa sisigawan ka.
Ano po siya,
Cool.
cool. Tsaka kahit na medyo naiinis na po siya kasi nga, halimbawa po nawawala na ng araw. Kalmado pa rin po siya kahit na ganun po. Kumbaga, madali lang po siyang, madali lang
Based on what Direk said about your performance, he stole the show.
He does, in many of the scenes that he's in, he steals the
Yes.
show.
Yes.
Can I say something else about Miko?
Yes. Yeah.
So I originally had pictured someone a bit older for the role,
Okay.
but when I saw Miko, his intensity and his truthfulness was something that I realized what you have in your head as a director, you shouldn't be so married to. You should actually look for the most talented people. And so it actually brings a different level of story that he's slightly younger. And I think it breaks people's heart to see what happens, what he does in the film. And so I really, it's a combination of raw talent and hard work, but I see Miko going places in his career, and that this is hopefully just the beginning.
Okay, galing mo raw, Miko. Naintindihan mo ba yun, Miko? So, kung sa pangalawang beses yun na bang naging anak niya, no? Pangalawang beses.
Actually po, pangatlo.
Ano yung una? What's the first one?
Short film po yan eh.
Short film.
Alam nga lang sa panahon ng pagpapasayag po yung pakaitan ng short film.
Yung second mo?
Yung pambante po, yun po yung full length.
And then ito.
Ito po yung pangatlo.
So, ano yung second mo? Bambante. Ano yun?
Scarecrow po. Scarecrow.
Scarecrow. Ay, ano. And ito na, kumusta si Alessandra kay Ksena Miko na alam naman na magaling na artista? Nasabayan mo ba siya dito? Especially kanina, nagsasabihin mo, dami mong lalaki na.
Si Tita Alessandra po, ano po siya, pagdating po sa eksena na po mismo sa oras na po ng take, ano na po siya, seryoso na po. Kumbaga, pag may oras po ng biroan, may oras po na trabaho po talaga. Hindi po siya yung...
Luka-luka.
I mean, ano po siya?
Kasaway.
Hindi po. Pag wala po kami sa take po, or kumakain na po kami ng break po, ano po siya, palabiro po siya, tapos nakakatawa. Ayaw niya na po ng yung mga ka-distract sa kanya. Gusto niya po yung, para matapos po kami agad, gusto niya po yung teamwork po kami lahat. Tutulungan po kami para matapos po agad yung scene po.
Hindi ka naman natakot sa kanya nung
Hindi
itong
naman.
third time na to?
Hindi naman po.
Hindi ka gaya nung mauna. Nung mauna natakot ka sa kanya? Hindi naman.
Hindi naman po. Bihira lang naman po ako mag-sabay pag-take ng movies.
Okay. Tanong ko si Ben. Ben, Parasite won as Best Picture in the recent Oscar Awards. So, what can you say about Filipino films if you just this, like this? Do you have a chance?
Absolutely. I think Parasite winning completely changes the conversation for the Oscars and what can win. It levels the playing field in terms of what is really good cinema can rise and travel. And so, you know, it really opens the doors for Filipino filmmakers and films to be considered for the Oscars. And actually, in France, the distributor that released Parasite bought this film and will release this next, and they see it as in the similar space for audiences. And so our hope is that you know, by this hybrid style filmmaking of, you know, American director, Filipino cast and story, that we can help open the doors also to the conversations, and also people like Direct Eric and so many other filmmakers from here that are recognized internationally. It definitely feels like we're in a day and age where that's possible.
Okay, thank you. Are you staying here for good? Are you willing to do films for local producers? Yeah? Will you be doing?
I was here for about 6 months and in the pre-production and production of the film, and then I'm here for a few weeks now. I actually haven't even begun to explore the country, so I'm excited. After this movie release, I'll go see more of the country, because all I saw was Caloocan City the last time. Yeah, that's where we shot the film. So people say, "Oh, you went to Philippines, it's so beautiful." I said, all I really saw was Second Avenue. But I would love to keep the conversation going if there are projects here. For me, it really comes down to the story. It has to be something you feel deeply to compel you through the whole process. And so for me, it really just comes down to story, and I do see incredible stories here.
If you would be given the chance to do a film, working with a local film, working with the local actors, what story in mind would you like to do that will be shown internationally?
I mean, this is it. This is the film. Yeah,
Okay.
you know, this is my fifth film, but to be honest, it's the one I'm most deeply proud of. It's a very emotional film, and I think that even though, you know, as an American director coming here, you know, not knowing what a public audience would want, I also know that Filipino people are very like to feel deeply, and are very like family is very important. And so, regardless of, you know, sensibility, my hope is that the film connects with people on an emotional level. If you want to feel something very intensely, this film is for you.
Thank you and good luck then.
Thank you.
Lar?
May question pa, Tita Laura?
Okay, Miko, please tell us, ano yung mga ginawa mo, I mean, between Bambanti and now, what's this?
Sa Bambanti po kasi, batang bilang po sa probinsya, sa Isabela po namin sinunod po. Sa Bambanti po, ano lang po siya, kumbaga kung paano lang po mamuhay yung pamilya po namin sa probinsya. Dito naman po sa watchlist, sa ano po, kumbaga parang sa Maynila po yung buhay po namin, kung ano po yung nangyayari sa paligid.
Oh, so ano yung ginawa mo? Ano yung pinagkaabalahan mo between nung after ng Bambanti at saka ito, watchlist, sa pagitan ng dalawang pelikula, ano yung mga pinagkakalahan?
So, Bambanti, nung pagkatapos po sa Bambanti po namin, ano po, kasi po, bumalik po. Pero, nung nag-showing po kasi nun, ano po kasi, doon ko po naranasan yung unang paglabas ko namin ng bansa. Doon po kami nag-showing sa Qatar. Tapos, dito po sa watchlist, ano po, normal pa rin naman po, kasi habang nag-shooting pa rin naman po ako, pumapasok pa rin naman po ako. Doon po kasi nung nag-shooting po kami ng Bambanti, absent po ako ng ilang week kasi po sa Isabela Canada, so mga Bambanti. Dito po, ano po siya, parang nakaschedule po yung pagpasok ko dito.
Okay, Ben, are there other stories that have been offered to you? I mean,
It was a wonderful collaboration, and there is that conversation of working together again. I would say, as a director, they say 90% of good directing is casting, and so this film, not just Alessandra and Miko, but Jake and Art, everyone is performing at their top game, and so it's a very different style performance, very grounded and reality based, and even just the producers like Sir Don and Eric, for them to take a risk on a film like this that's an international collaboration speaks volumes about them. And so I'm excited to continue all the conversations in possible ways.
I understand Watchlist has been to some festivals. How was that?
It's been a wild ride. We premiered in Seattle, and we went to Deauville, which is considered the best of the best American films from that year. And to be honest, it was the first Filipino film in Deauville. And they double checked. They said, "You're American, but the film is Filipino, so where does this fall into our category?" And it said, "It's for you to decide," and they still took it. So that was an incredible honor. We just won our first award at the Belgian festival last week for the best film. And so it's been remarkable, I think, to be able, the power of cinema is to bring these stories to the world. And hopefully by having, international perspective and also local perspective, we can help open up the conversations and audiences around the world. So we will release in the US in April, theatrical release there, and then we also have the release in France coming and a few other territories. So yeah, it's landing with audiences.
Before Watchlist, did you have any idea about the Philippines movie industry?
A little bit. I had only known that I'd seen Direct Eric's film On the Job, and it blew me away with the type of stories that were being told from here. And so that's actually how I met Direct Eric, was through those producers of that film, XYZ Films, in the US. I called them and I said, "Do you know anyone in the Philippines?" And they said, "Yes, go talk to Direct Eric and Sir Don." And so I had seen some of the more groundbreaking cinema coming from here, and that was really exciting to be able to come. And for me, like I said, it was you are the vessel for the story. I feel like the universe wanted it to happen, and it chose me to be the one to tell it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Who else would like to ask? From Mr. Mel Navarro. Question from...
Hello, welcome to the Philippines Direct. Are you familiar that there are other Filipino films that talk about extrajudicial killings, and were you able to have a glimpse about those films?
That have what about them?
Were you able to watch or have an idea that there are other films about extrajudicial killings?
Yeah, I've seen a couple of them, and I'm aware of those the other stories. It's a very sensitive topic, and so the intensity that people feel about it, either one way or the other, for or against, is something that was most important for us to capture truthfully. So again, I feel I only made this film if we were saying something adding to the conversation, not repeating what was already been said. And so our hope is that this could be the definitive film on the subject.
Alright. What major production problems did you encounter, if any, in shooting here in the Philippines?
I think shooting in the real neighborhoods in Caloocan, which is one of the most dangerous barangays in this particular Second Avenue. We discovered this neighborhood because Director Eric shot on the job there and told us stories about going into the footpaths and getting lost. And I guess some of the realities is that what we're portraying in the film with the drug wars was actually happening in these neighborhoods. So it was oftentimes like somewhat distressing that there would be stories around us of what we were actually portraying. Early on, we'd shot by these train tracks and built part of the Maria's house there, and there was a train that came by and actually hit the set and took part of it with it. And it was a really long shoot outdoors and at nighttime, and people fell sick, and it was for us like there was always a consideration of like safety first, especially if we're doing a film like this. That's, portraying the subject, we have to make sure that we're sensitive to everyone that's in front of the camera and behind the camera.
Maybe for my last question, why do you think the Filipino audience should watch your film next week?
Well, like I said, I think it's a story about family and love and a mother doing anything to protect her children. And in America, we don't have the same strong family unit as here. And on my Indian side of the family, it's similar. Like not just your mother, father, brother, sister, but aunts, uncles, cousins, grandparents. It's really the heart of the Filipino culture. And so for me, this is the love is what triumphs all. And so in hardship, I think that if the Filipinos have a big heart. I felt most people I've met hold family close and are very warm and welcoming. And so my hope is that the film's heart speaks to the hearts of the people.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have another question from Cesar Batina.
Kay Nico po, we found out that this film was rated R16 by MTRCB. Nico, ano yung pakiramdam that hindi mo siya mapapanood sa big screen?
Okay lang nung
Po.
isang tama lang po. Okay lang naman po kasi sensitive nga naman po yung nangyayari po. So, para sa akin, okay lang naman po kahit na kasi napanood na rin naman po namin yung mga
Napanood na yung movie. Ano yung sa tingin mo yung pinaka-challenge na ginawa mo dito? Yung talagang sumubok sa pagiging artista?
yung ano po, yung part po na gantang nila na nakagapos po ako sa nakagapos po ako ng slash tape. Ayun po kasi, ano po yun magdamag po namin yung shoot, tsaka halos maubos na po yung boses ko kasi po. Halos lahat po kami ng sigawan po talaga. Siguro po, maging ano na lang po, kumbaga, maging responsable na lang po tayo sa lahat po ng mga gagawin po natin. Huwag po tayong kagaya po sa mga kabataan, sa kagaya ko pong kabataan na kagaya po ng iba sa amin na yung iba po kasi nalululong po sa droga. Hanggat maaari, iwasan na lang po. Or sa mga hindi pa po nakakatry, huwag po nilang iiwasan talaga. Huwag na po nilang susubukan kasi pag nasubukan po nila, sobrang laki na po kasi problema yung pinasok ko.
for Direct Ben. Direct Ben, we know that as a filmmaker, you are creating a film not just only to entertain the audience, but to give something to us as an audience po. In your own, in your instinct, what value that you put or as a Filipino from this film?
Yeah, I will say that while I'm excited that the film is releasing in the US and Europe, I'm most nervous and excited how it will be received here because it's a Filipino story and it's impossible to see the film and not feel something very deeply one way or the other. It's impossible. It's a very hopefully impactful film. What impact that will be, I don't know yet. But my greatest hope with any film, and especially this one, is that cinema is the most powerful window into the human condition. It can literally put you a fly on the wall in someone else's experience. And so there are a lot of, like I was saying back, even in the US now, there's a lot of divisions within society and some groups, not getting along with other groups. And that's a human issue I think also happens here. And so my hope is that this can humanize the humanity in all of us and help break down divides and maybe change our perceptions of, when we're talking about stigma, like addict, give a little bit of humanity and see that everyone is suffering, and film can actually show us the humanity, each of us, to break down that suffering together and hopefully build compassion. So my greatest hope is that the film can, break down those divides and see the compassion in all of us.
And my last question po, after this film show being shown in the Philippines, what's awaits for this? Do you will send it to other film festivals abroad and other countries?
Yeah, we're also excited because once the film releases here, we'll continue the releases around the world. And so there's a lot more US festivals it's going to play in, the release in the US. And it's making waves in the Hollywood community. Like the people that have seen it are really responding to it. I even know ALESSANDRA got called from a Hollywood producer recently about her performance here. So I think the exciting thing is that it can open the world up to Filipino talent, Filipino stories. And for me, it's more exciting to be a bridge builder in that way.
Thank you. We have last question from Mr. Pablo Taniman.
Hello. My questions, just a few questions. What is the feeling like shooting a film that is often the content of day-to-day news on TV? And then, knowing the situation in the Philippines, what do you want to achieve as a filmmaker as it applies to this project?
Yeah, I think the thing about fiction storytelling is that newspapers and journalism and nonfiction can tell you what happened, but fiction can tell you what it feels like. And so where we can see a headline or statistics, this goes beyond the story. I think for me, what really drew me to the story is looking beyond the headlines and saying, okay, there's a story of someone, a father who's been killed in the drug wars, and that's the story, but the real story for me starts the next day. What is it like to move forward with a hole in your family? And what does that feel like to every day after that? And that's how do we understand the domino effect that happens after the headline. What I hope to accomplish with this, I really think, like I've said, cinema is the power to build compassion and build understanding. I really think, we live in difficult times, and it's not, in many places in the world, and films can give us hope. As much as they can show us the common suffering of each other, they can inspire hope in us, and it's my hope to do that.
Yeah, last question. What are the best things that came out from this collaboration?
For me, this was the first film that I created entirely from the heart. I had always approached creation as a little bit more intellectual or academic, and this film, I really felt like there was a hand that was guiding it into the world, and that I was this vessel for the story to happen. And for me, that was a breakthrough. And honestly, I felt a responsibility to the people that this film is about. Like there are hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of people that are living in, it's been hard for a lot of people. And so I felt a tremendous responsibility. If I didn't get this story right, it would actually be hurtful or disrespectful. And so, yeah, I guess, and honestly, the collaborations. Like I've worked in situations where, when you're trying to make the film, there's a lot of other forces at play. But this one, everyone was playing the same song, and when you see it, you can feel that. It's not different. I say being a director is like being a conductor in a symphony. Like you are there, but you are providing everyone the atmosphere to create. And sometimes you do that and people are playing different songs and you can feel it as say that didn't work. But in this one, everyone's playing the same song, and that's very rare. It's lightning in a bottle.
Okay. Thank you for the questions. Director Ben and Nico, please invite our media friends to help us support the movie.
Okay. Well, thanks everyone. I'm Ben Ricky, the director of Watchlist from Reality Entertainment with Alessandra Rossi. Very excited to present this film to the Filipino audience. It's been a labor of love. There's a huge heart and a huge story about family. So come see it on February 19th. We'll see you next week.
Po sa pagmamahalan po ng pamilya between sa anak po at sa ina po. Kung gaano po sila katatag magmahalan kahit na po nung sila problema. Kaya po sana po panoorin niyo po. Marami po kayong lesson na matulungan dito. Thank you po.
Okay, thank you Director Ben and Nico. Photo option.
Thanks everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. For updates on